Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hi everyone, I welcome you to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper reading. So today let us take up the Indian Express Explained section from the last week and some important news from last Sunday's The Hindu newspaper. The news to be discussed has been displayed on the screen and time stamping has been provided in the description section. Our first topic is Airspace Map of India. So the context of this news is that recently Ministry of Civil Aviation has launched an airspace map for India for drone operations. So this map is basically released to regulate the drone operations in India for civilian use, and this map allows the civilian drone operators to check the demarcated fly zones. We will learn that what are the different fly zones as per this airspace map. So the civilian drone operators are required to go certain formalities depending on that in which zone they want to fly their drones. So the topic falls under the syllabus GS3 in the subtopic of Science and Technology, from which regularly every year the questions are asked. For example, in UPSC prelims this question was asked. 3 statements were given and it was asked that at the present level of technology, which of the above activities can be successfully carried out using the drones. So the activities mentioned were spraying the pesticides on the crop field, inspecting the craters of an active volcano, and collecting the breathe samples from spouting whales for DNA analysis. Under this topic, we will learn that what exactly do we mean by drones, what are its applicability in various fields of life. Then we will come to the technical details of airspace map which is relevant for your examination point of view. We will learn all the different colors, that what these colors exactly mean as per the new airspace map. Then from the prelims point of view, we will learn some facts and all the features of this airspace map. And finally, we will also discuss the recently released Drone Rules 2021 in this context, because it was Drone Rules 2021 according to which this airspace map is being made. So the first question is that what are drones? Drones are basically unpiloted aircraft which are formally known as unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. So drones are nothing but just flying robots. However, in recent times, drones are becoming increasingly useful in many areas of life. For example, nowadays it is being used in agriculture. Think about it how. In agriculture, it can be used to measure the crop losses, which further can be used to claim the insurance, or they can be used to spray chemicals. And this was one of the options in this question C, spraying pesticides on a crop field. Then drones can also be used in security purposes. For example, in surveillance, carrying remote strikes. You must have heard about the USA strike in Iran. Then they can also be used for land measurement data, which can further be used for digitization of land records. And similarly in other fields also, like mining, infrastructure, disaster response. But as we know that though drones on one hand offer several benefits for humans in different walks of life, but on the other hand they pose some serious security as well as privacy issues. For example, as we discussed that they can be used for carrying out the remote strikes, so it can be used to achieve certain political motives. And similarly, if the drones can be used for surveillance, so they can be further used to click inappropriate photographs, which in turn can lead to privacy breaches of individuals. So that is why, because the modern science and technology is becoming a double-edged sword, hence we need a proper regulation to balance the competing interests. And that is why the Ministry of Civil Aviation has released an airspace map. As you can see, this is the airspace map of Maharashtra and this is the airspace map of Delhi. So In both these pictures, we can easily identify three colors, that is red, green and yellow. We will know the meanings of these red, green and yellow zones. But first we will learn these key facts about recently released airspace map, which is relevant from the prelims point of view. First, that it was launched by Ministry of Civil Aviation, as we discussed. Second, it was developed by two private firms. One was the MapMyIndia and the other was the Happiest Minds. Now you don't have to go in details about these firms. You just should know that it is developed by the private firms. And the third thing is that it is available on Director General of Civil Aviation, that is DGCA's Digital Sky platform. So from this, another important fact comes to us, that Digital Sky platform is available with DGCA. So these are the three basic key facts about the airspace map. Now we will learn about the features of these airspace maps. First is that this airspace map is interactive in nature and authorities can do timely modifications of these airspace map, which means that this is not permanent in nature. So there is an element of continuous real-time modification. Second is that as we saw in these pictures that there are three differently colored areas. So the airspace map divides the entire country into three zones, that is the green zone, the yellow zone and the red zone. If the civilian drone operators have to fly their drones in the green zone areas, then no permission is required up to drones weighing 500 kilograms. Earlier the limit was 300 kilograms, but now it is increased up to 500 kilograms. Similarly, the yellow zones allow the civilian drone operators to fly in these areas, but with permission from the air traffic control authorities. And what are these air traffic control authorities? Like Airports Authority of India, Indian Air Force, Indian Navy, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. So these are the air traffic control authorities. Depending upon their different domains of power, the civilian drone operators can take the permission from these authorities and can fly in the yellow zone. Similarly, the third classification is the red zone. Now this zone is very important because by the name the red zone, it comes to our mind that civilian drone operators might not be allowed to enter into this space. However, this is not the case. The civilian operators can enter in these zones also, but with the permission of central government. Another important feature is that these zones are not uniform in nature. All these zones have different limits, different definitions in different areas. For example, the green zone is the airspace up to 400 feet, which is not designated as red or yellow zone. So that means that the airspace up to 400 feet, which is not red and yellow zone, will be the green zone. And similarly, if the area which we are talking about lies near the operational airport, then the limit of the airspace for green zone is 200 feet. So the point is that the zones are not uniform in all the areas. They are non-uniform depending that in which areas the drone operators are willing to fly their drones. So this airspace map is freely available on the Digital Sky platform, and it is mandatory for the drone operators to check up the airspace before flying their drones. Now we will look into the Drone Rules 2021, which was recently released. The first is that it talks about the airspace map, which we have discussed in the beginning. It says that the airspace map for drone operators shall be designed to be programmatically accessible through machine readable applications programming interface. Now what is machine readable? There are certain data which can be read by humans. For example, there is a PDF file which is easily readable by humans, but the machines are unable to read them. And there are certain other data, for example codes, which machines can read by themselves. So the machine readable application should be there. The second is that the rules are based on the premise of trust and self-certification and non-intrusive monitoring. The third is that these rules have reduced several permissions and approvals which were required earlier. Next is that Digital Sky platform is being developed as user-friendly online single window system so as to enhance the accessibility and to make it user-friendly. Further, the rules 2021 say that no security clearances are required before the issuance of any registration or license. This is further done to boost the drone markets in our country. And next provision that we already discussed, that the weight has been increased from 300 kilograms to the 500 kilograms, and the important part is that these rules cover drone taxes also, which according to some experts is the future of infrastructure across the world. The seventh is that there is no restriction on the foreign ownership in Indian drones companies so as to increase the foreign investment in India's drone market. No requirement of import clearances are required from DGCA, and the maximum penalty for violations has been reduced to 1 lakh. Further, the drone corridors will be developed for cargo deliveries also. And last, that there will be a drone promotion council which is to be set by government with the participation of academia, startups and the other stakeholders. So the idea is that these drone rules 2021 aims to strengthen the drone market in India by increasing the ease of investment and taking a multi-stakeholder approach in planning and regulating the drone airspace. So, summing up the entire topic, first we discussed that what do we mean by drones, and then we came to the applicability of the drones, where we discussed that though the drones have high usages in various fields, yet it poses some serious security and privacy issues which requires that airspace should be regulated. And then we analyze some key facts about the recently released airspace map, further going on to the detailed features of these airspace maps, and finally we concluded on the drone rules 2021, which is aimed at increasing the market in India with promoting ease of investment and taking the multi-stakeholder approach. Our second topic is that why cartels can be even worse than monopolies. Now you might be having some idea that what is a monopoly market. If you don't have, don't worry, we will discuss in this topic that what is a difference between cartelization and monopoly. So this topic was in news in the context because recently the Competition Commission of India found that 3 beer companies had colluded to fix the beer prices for a full decade starting from 2009 to 2018. So if the 3 competitors in the same segment have colluded to fix the beer prices, we can imagine that it will be very detrimental for the free market economy, which should be based on a proper demand and supply balance. So that is why, because it will hamper the free market economy, the CCI slapped a penalty of rupees 873 crore on the companies. So this was the context. Now this news falls under the syllabus of GS2 paper under the subtopic of governance. And we can also see that in 2015 there was a question asked about the Satyam scandal. In the light of the Satyam scandal, discuss the changes brought in corporate governance to ensure transparency and accountability. So similarly, the question can be asked from the cartelization point of view also. Under this topic, these are the various domains which we are going to discuss. First, we will understand that under Competition Act 2002, what is a basic difference between a cartel and a monopoly. Then we will learn some key facts about the Competition Commission of India and the process of cartelization. Then we will also discuss in brief that what are the anti-competitive agreements, what is bid rigging, what is predatory pricing, and the impacts of anti-competitive agreements. And in the last, we will discuss that why cartelization is more dangerous than monopolies, which is the main topic, the main theme of this news. So the Competition Act 2002 defines the cartel as an association of either the producers or sellers or distributors or traders or service providers, which means association of anyone which is there in the supply chain of any goods or services, and they attempt to control or manipulate the sale or price of goods and services. So in a simple language, a cartel is an agreement which can be formal, informal, written or verbal or any other type. It is the association, the agreement between some people which are there in supply chains, and they decide to manipulate the free flow of that goods and services, which in turn will directly hamper the prices of those goods and services. On the other hand, a monopoly is a market structure characterized by a single seller. So see the difference here. There were either producers or sellers or distributors or traders or service providers. Here we have a single seller and no competition exists because he is the sole seller of the goods with no close substitutes. According to CCI, any company or a person which enjoys a monopoly in the market, he or she also enjoys a dominant position in the market, which can be used to manipulate or distort the competition in the market, so as to ensure free and fair competition in the market. The Competition Act 2002 created a statutory body known as Competition Commission of India. So the basic facts of Competition Commission of India is that it is a statutory body created under its own act. It functions under Ministry of Corporate Affairs. The composition is that it has one chairperson plus 6 members which are appointed by the central government. The nature of this body is quasi-judicial, and the main aim of this body is to control the monopolization and cartelization so as to ensure free and fair competition along with protecting the consumer rights. Now this is also important, that Competition Commission of India, though looks at controlling the monopoly and cartelization, it is also responsible for protecting the consumer rights. So the cartelization has primarily 3 components. One is that there is an agreement between the producers, sellers or anyone. This agreement can be written or verbal in nature. The second component is that the agreement is done between the competing parties themselves. For example, if I am a producer of a car of brand A and you are a producer of a car of brand B, now we are competing with each other, but eventually we enter into an agreement that now we will fix the prices of our cars. Hence, now the situation is that competitors have entered into an agreement, which in turn will lead to restrictive competition in the market. So here we can term this agreement as an anti-competitive agreement. Now the anti-competitive agreements have 2 other important examples also. The first is the bid rigging and second is the predatory pricing. These terms are very important, can be asked as it is in the prelims paper. Now first we will understand that what is bid rigging. For this, first we should know that what is bidding. Bidding is a process of offering prices, for example at auctions. What we do at auction, or what you see at auction, that different people are quoting their prices for different products, this is known as bidding. And the rigging is when the parties enter into conspiracy to manipulate certain things. So the bid rigging is when the different people, the different parties enter into a conspiracy to manipulate the prices which are being offered. And the second is predatory pricing. Now this is also a simple term. What is predatory? You might have heard about this term in your ecology or environment syllabus, the predatory species. That is, the species which are on the higher trophic levels, they prey on the lower trophic level species. So the predatory gives us a message that it is eliminating someone. So what is predatory pricing? Predatory pricing is a situation whereby some sellers keep their prices of their goods and services so low that their competitors are eliminated. Suppose we have a bike of a brand A and its cost in the market is, for example, 2 lakh rupees. Now, if I enter into the market and I keep the price of that very bike at rupees around 20,000, which is far below than the prices offered by my competitors, so eventually all the competitors will be eliminated from the market, and then I will be having a monopoly in the market, which I can exploit then by raising the prices slowly. So that is why predatory pricing and bid riggings are anti-competitive agreements, as they are distorting the free and fair competition in the market. So the impacts of anti-competitive agreements are very simple. First is that it creates the artificial demand by controlling the supplies. It can happen because, for example, in cartelization, two parties enter into an agreement that now onwards we will hold the supply of both these brands. So eventually the demand for both these brands will rise and the prices will be inflated. Once the prices get inflated, only then we will ensure our supply chains to move smoothly. Hence it creates an artificial demand, which in turn leads to inflation. Further, it also have impacts on the choices of the consumers. In the same very example, now because the suppliers of car A and car B have entered into an agreement and they are not supplying the cars, so now there are no cars of brand A and B in the market. So the consumers have necessarily to opt for brand C. Hence, the agreement between A and B have altered the choices of the consumers in the favor of C. And all these three features will finally distort the market. Now, if you have understood that what exactly do we mean by cartelization, now we will analyze briefly that why cartelization can be more dangerous than monopolies, how they have more negative impacts compared to monopolies. The first is that because now cartels are into an agreement and they know that they are controlling the market, they will not be interested in conducting research and investment to improve the quality of their products and services. And it will kill the competition in the market, because now they have created an artificial demand, artificial inflation. They have impacted the choices of the consumers and ultimately they have distorted the market. So it will eventually kill the competition, and both these things will ultimately affect the consumers and the overall economy. In the monopoly, when there is only one supplier, that supplier is not restricting anyone else to come into the market. For example, there is a product X sold by person A. Now for the time being, yes, we agree that A person is having a monopoly, but he cannot restrict the person B to enter into the market. The person B is free to enter into the market. Okay, so the monopoly is a temporary phenomena which can be challenged by someone else, but the cartelization can hamper the long-term prospects of the overall economy. That is why this cartelization, according to some experts, are more dangerous than monopolies. So summing up the entire topic, first we analyzed that under the Competition Act 2002, what is the difference between a cartel and a monopoly. Then we discussed few key features of a Competition Commission of India, and in this context we understood the process of cartelization. From this we analyzed that what do we exactly mean by anti-competitive agreements with the examples of bid rigging and predatory pricing, and the impacts of the anti-competitive agreements, and finally we discussed that how cartelization can be more dangerous than monopolies. Coming to our next topic, the NASA's new eye in the sky that will help study the climate change. Now this topic comes from the space sector, and the context of this topic is a NASA satellite was successfully launched on September 27 from California. The Earth monitoring satellite named as Landsat 9 is a joint mission of NASA and US Geological Survey. So this topic falls under our syllabus of General Studies paper 3 under the subsection of technology and the microsection of awareness in the field of space. From the prelims point of view, this topic is very important because on regular basis at least one question is there in prelims paper. For example, a sample question is taken from the UPSC previous year questions that in the context of space technology, what is Bhuvan recently in news for? There are 4 options: that it was a mini satellite launched by ISRO for promoting distant education, or the name given to the next Moon Impact Probe for Chandrayaan 2, or a geoportal of ISRO with 3D imaging capabilities of India, and the last option is a space telescope developed by India. So the answer is C, and in a similar fashion there can be a question on Landsat 9 also. Now we will look at some key features which is relevant from your examination point of view. The first Landsat satellite was launched in 1972. So what basically do we mean by Landsat? Landsat are those satellites which study the land. They have high optimum ground resolutions and spectral bands to efficiently track the land use and any changes therein. That is why the Landsat satellites have collected images from our planet and helped understand how the land usage has changed over the decades. There are several benefits of these satellites. For example, they are used in research and development work to find out the new potential areas having high petroleum reserves. Then they can also be used in agriculture as well as policy formulations. They are highly relevant for specialized studies like for glaciologists, climatologists and seismologists. So it takes around 8 days to capture the whole Earth, and it captures the thermal radiations and the sunlight reflected off the Earth's surface and studies the visible, near infrared and short wave infrared portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now these different waves are classified on the basis of their differences in wavelength. The visible light has a wavelength of 380 nm to 750 nm, and these are visible to human eyes. On the other hand, the infrared waves have the wavelength of 700 nm to 1 mm. From the infrared waves, the non-visible portion of the spectrum starts. As a result, infrared waves cannot be seen by the human eyes except with the help of some special equipments like security cameras or etc. Now the Landsat 9 is working in tandem with the European Space Agency's Sentinel-2 satellites in order to have a more comprehensive look of the Earth. Now from here another important fact emerges which is relevant for our examination, that Sentinel-2 satellites are of European Space Agencies and they are dedicated to measure the changes in the global sea level. This Sentinel-2 satellites is also a joint collaboration of the European Space Agency, NASA, European Organization for Exploitation of Meteorological Satellite, USA's NOAA, that is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, with some contributions from the France National Center for Space Studies, which means that it is a multi-country project. So summing up this entire topic, we learned about the context, that why this topic is in news. We also understood its syllabus highlights, and then we had a brief look on the key features, that the first Landsat satellite was launched in 1972 and their prime objective is to understand that how the land use is changing. They are certain specialized benefits of land satellites also, and they take 8 days to capture the whole Earth. And how do they work? How do they measure the changes in land use? They track the thermal radiations which are reflected off the Earth's surface in visible near infrared and the infrared waves. And they are also working in tandem with the European Space Agency's Sentinel-2 satellites, which are used to track the changes in the global sea level, and which is a multi-country project. So moving on to the next topic, that is the dismantling of the Ordnance Factory Board. The context of this news was that recently the government has decided to corporatize the Ordnance Factory Board under 7 defense public sector units. The first industrial establishment was set up in 1801, and this will cease to exist from October 1, and the assets, staffs, operations, everything of the present 41 ordnance factories will be transferred to 7 defense public sector units. Under this topic, we will get to know that what is basically an ordnance factory board and what is its major roles. What do we exactly mean by corporatization? What are the major reasons for corporatization, that why the government is taking such a step, and then what are the challenges associated? This topic falls under the syllabus of General Studies paper 3 under the subsection of economic development, and the microsection of effects of liberalization on the economy, changes in industrial policy and their effects on the industrial growth. So first, that what exactly is the Ordnance Factory Board? Ordnance Factory Board is a government entity which was tasked to supply the weapons, ammunitions and all types of supplies for the armed forces, paramilitary as well as police forces. But now this government entity is being transformed into corporatization. Now first we should understand that what is a corporatization. This is basically the restructuring and transformation of the government entity of a state-owned asset into a corporation. A corporation is basically an organization whereby the management control is retained by the government, but it also have certain characteristics of private entities, like it has its board of directors, it has its own management, and it also has some shareholders. So basically a corporation is a mix of government and a private entity, and this is basically done to ensure the effectiveness and enhance the efficiency of an organization. This is in contrast to a pure completely government department, which generally is characterized by high level of red tapeism. And the similar issues were being faced in the Ordnance Factory Board also. That is why in order to liberalize the working and in order to enhance the efficiency of the OFBs, the government has decided to corporatize it. Now we will understand that what are the major reasons of corporatization. First, it was recommended by various committees from time to time. The 3 major committees which has recommended to corporatize the OFBs are TKS Nair Committee in 2000s. The second was Vijay Kelkar Committee in 2005. And the third important committee was of Vice Admiral Raman Puri in 2015. So from time to time various committees have recommended to corporatize the OFBs so as to achieve the twin objectives, that is, the management should be retained by the government but the efficiency should be increased. The second reason is that there were high expenses of the OFBs in the non-core activities. For example, the additional labor costs or the supervision cost. So there were high expenses on the non-core activities which were going on, which was one of the biggest reason of low profit margins. The third was that the OFBs were inefficient in functioning as they were characterized by red tapeism. As we have already discussed that pure government entities in general are characterized by red tapeism and low productivity. Next important reason was that OFVs were virtually having a monopoly in the market, which in turn was hindering the innovation in defense manufacturing. And the last was because of the above reasons, the OFBs were facing high losses, and that is why the government had decided to corporatize the OFBs. However, there are certain challenges also. The first and the biggest challenge is that there are different factories under Ordnance Factory Board which are scattered all across India. For example, Chandigarh, Dehradun, Nalanda, etc. So it will be very difficult to integrate all the scattered firms across India. The second challenge is from the workers' side, that the workers are now fearing that corporatization can be a first step towards privatization. So there is a trust deficit between the government and the workers. And the third challenge is that just corporatizing an entity does not guarantee that it will produce the desired results. There should be massive investments. Presently, the budgetary allocation for the government is less than 1% in the sector of research and development. So, the government must invest in promoting the research and development so as to overall reform the ordnance factories. So, summing up the topic, first we understood that what is the basic role of the Ordnance Factory Board, and in relation we also understood that what do we mean by corporatization and how is it different from pure government department. Then we analyzed the reasons that why is it so that government is corporatizing the Ordnance Factory Board, and we also analyzed the associated challenges from the different stakeholders' point of view. Moving on to our next topic, the dance of the llamas. Now this was also in news in the context that recently a filmmaker, Binoy K. Bahl, has released a documentary, The Dance of the Liberation of the Llamas. This word is very important in this context. The dance of the liberation of the llamas that captures the spiritual experience of the charm, because this dance referred to here is a charm dance. So this comes directly under our GS1 syllabus, Indian Heritage and Culture, the salient aspects of the art forms, literature and architecture form from ancient to the modern times. And the questions from this topic like Buddhism, Jainism, etc. have continuously been asked in the prelims as well as mains. For example, here I have taken few sample questions. The first is that with reference to the religious practice in India, the Sthanakvasi sect belongs to Jainism. Similarly, which of the above are the features of the Mahayana Buddhism? So the point is that you should have a basic idea of our art and culture, and from these questions you can also guess the questions which can be asked in the context of charm dance. For example, there might be a question that charm dance belongs to which of the following religions. So we will look into certain facts of this charm dance. First, what are the lamas? Lamas are the priests in the Buddhist religion, and the charm dance is performed by the lamas as a means to achieve meditation. The charm dance belongs to Yogacara school of Buddhism, and this Yogacara school is also known as Vinayavad doctrine, and this Vinayavad doctrine is the doctrine of consciousness. So these lamas perform the charm dance and they keep the worshipping deity in their mind. It is believed that this is a sort of meditation to realize their consciousness, and the deity which they have kept in their mind, they believe that eventually they themselves will convert or merge into those deities. That is why the dance is being performed. So this Yogacara school was founded in Kashmir in the 4th century by two very important Buddhist scholars, namely Asang and Vasubandhu. This Yogacara school later on developed into a sophisticated Vajrayana form of Buddhism. Now, from the basic information, Buddhism is divided into three schools. The first is the Hinayan school, the second is the Mahayana school, and the third is the Vajrayana school. All these schools differ in their principles and practices. For example, the Hinayan school believed that Gautam Buddha was a human being who attained liberation. The Mahayana school recognizes Gautam Buddha as a divine creature, a form of a god. And later on, the Vajrayana school is the school of Tantric Buddhism. And this was ritual based school. Various tantras and mantras were the part of Vajrayana school of Buddhism. And the next important thing is that costumes and the masks are an integral part of the dance. You can see this from this picture also. Elaborate costumes and masks is worn by those lamas who are practicing this dance. All the sounds in the charms are sacred mantras. As we discussed that the Vajrayana school is based on tantric principles, and the drum which is being used in this dance is a reminder of a deep sound at the beginning of creation and at the moment of Buddha's enlightenment. So summing up this small topic, that the dance, the charm dance, is performed by the lamas who are priests in the Buddhist religion, and it belongs to Yogacara school, which is also called as the Viravad school, and it is based on consciousness and meditation. The costumes and the masks are an integral part. The dance has two important characteristics. One is their sacred mantras and other is the drum, which signifies the creation and the enlightenment moment of Lord Buddha. And in the end, before concluding our session, we will discuss the question of the day dated 1st October 2021. Which of the following deals with the regulation of the political parties in India? Option B is the correct answer, the Representation of People's Act 1951. And the question for today is, consider the following statements. The charm dance is derived from the philosophy of the Vajrayana Buddhism. And the second statement is, in India, this dance form is practiced in the state of Sikkim. You have to select the correct options among these four.